The table was set with white china, 7 plates gleaming under the dining room light. My mother-in-law looked at my 7-year-old daughter standing in the doorway and said, "This table is for blood relatives." Then she put both hands on Sophie's shoulders and shoved her toward the front door. The whole room froze, but in my bag, beneath the birthday candles, I carried 2 things she didn't know about: an adoption decree and a folder of financial records I'd kept for 3 years. By the time I was done, the woman who thought she could move my child like a piece of furniture would be the one standing alone in the cold. Welcome back to Tranquil Drama Stories. I'm Clara. I'm 35, a bookkeeper by trade. And until that night, the invisible thread holding a family together that never bothered to look at the stitches. If you've ever been the one quietly paying a price to keep the peace, hit like right now. You'll want to see how this balance sheet finally got read aloud. I married Nathan 3 years ago. Sophie was 4, a little girl who called every man in a work shirt sir and drew our family with crayon suns in every corner. Nathan came with 2 children from his first marriage. Liam, 12, all elbows and stubborn opinions, and Ava, 10, who saw the world through glasses too big for her face. We lived in a narrow blue house in Oakwood, the kitchen always slightly cold, the refrigerator door so thick with Sophie's artwork you had to peel one back to open it. Nathan managed a cabinet shop 2 towns over, a calm man with sawdust permanently in his cuffs. I loved that house when it was full. I loved it most when no one was keeping score, but someone was. Every Sunday we drove 30 minutes out to Pine Ridge, where Nathan's mother Meredith kept a spotless house and a cold mental ledger. From the very first dinner, she had a way of saying Sophie's name that put a little space around it. "And how's Clara's little girl?" Never our Sophie. Never the youngest grandchild. Liam and Ava got the best chairs, the second helpings, the proud talk about the Hartley nose and the Hartley stubbornness. Sophie got a quiet warning about the stairs. At Christmas, I watched Meredith pass out gifts. Liam and Ava each had a pile. Sophie received 1 small box, the kind you'd hand to a neighbor's child. When I gently objected, Meredith smiled and said, "Children shouldn't be spoiled." Frank, my father-in-law, studied his coffee as if it held the secrets of the universe. The refrigerator in that house told the same story. Liam's school photo, Ava's science fair ribbon, not one of Sophie's drawings, though she brought a fresh one every visit and pressed it into Meredith's hands. I'd find them later in the recycling bin, smoothed flat, as if Meredith couldn't bear to keep them, but couldn't quite crumple them either. Nathan once explained that his mother came from people who measured worth in acres and bloodlines. 5 generations on the same land before the bank took it. To her, blood was the only deed that couldn't be foreclosed. I understood her. That was the hardest part. I understood her so well I couldn't hate her. So I let it slide, year after year, telling myself a child can't feel a temperature she hasn't been given the words to name. Sophie felt it. She just didn't have the language yet. She kept asking me a question I couldn't answer. The question could wait, I thought. Frank's heart could not. 2 years back, Frank's cardiologist put him on a fistful of pills, and the co-pays alone ran close to $500 a month. Then the roof on the Pine Ridge house gave out during a heavy winter $6,000 to replace. Far more than they had. Frank's pension covered the basics and nothing else. So the help started the way most help does, with 1 transfer I told myself was temporary. I covered the medication first. Then the groceries when the medication ate the grocery money. Then the roof in installments so it wouldn't appear as one frightening sum. Nathan knew. Meredith assumed the money came from his shop wages, his good son's heart. I never corrected her. Correcting her would have meant a conversation, and conversations in that family came with their own painful bill. So I set up the payments and logged each one. Because logging things is what I do with my hands when my chest gets tight. I kept those records not to use as a weapon, but because numbers are the only thing in that family that don't lie. A column doesn't care whose nose you have. It just adds up. Month after month, the total swelled into a quiet, heavy figure I carried without looking at directly. I could have told you the dollar amount at any moment. I just never spoke it aloud. There's a kind of giving that curdles when you keep it secret too long. It stops being generosity and starts being evidence. I didn't know that yet. I was about to learn it at a birthday party. Don't mistake my silence for softness. I drew the line more than once. Once, I sat Meredith down at her own kitchen table and said plainly that Sophie was her grandchild and the cold shoulder had to stop. She folded her hands and said she treated all children the same, then asked if I'd brought the receipts for Frank's prescription. Another time, I told Nathan I was finished funding a house where my child ate last. I had the bank app open, my thumb hovering over the cancel transfer. That same week, Frank landed in the ER with chest pains. You can't shut off a man's heart medication to win an argument with his wife, so I closed the app. Nathan asked me quietly to give his mother more time. He's a peacemaker, my husband, and peacemakers are wonderful until the peace they're keeping rests on your daughter's small shoulders. I gave it. I told myself the prejudice would die with her generation. I was wrong. Hate doesn't get tired. It just waits for an audience. But I kept one thing for myself through it all. A private sentence I'd whisper in the car on the way home while Sophie slept in her booster seat. Family isn't a bloodline. It's who shows up. I showed up. I'd been showing up for 3 years in dollars and casseroles and silence. The showing up was about to stop being silent. Something else had been building in the quiet. Nathan had been watching Sophie more and more. The way she laughed. The way she called him daddy without hesitation. One spring evening, he sat on the edge of her bed while she slept, then found me in the kitchen. I want to adopt her, he said. For real. On paper. Not stepfather. In court, where no one could argue at a dinner table. We hired a family attorney. Sophie's biological father had relinquished his rights years before. The process moved without a contested hearing. 6 weeks before the birthday, we drove to the county courthouse in our good clothes. A judge with reading glasses asked Nathan if he understood that adoption made Sophie his child in every legal sense his heir. His responsibility forever. No different from Liam and Ava. Nathan said yes before the judge finished the sentence. Sophie got to bang the little gavel. We have a photo of her mid-swing, mouth wide open, Nathan's hand steadying her wrist. Her new name, Sophie Hartley, not Clara's girl. Hartley, like the nose, like the stubbornness, like the everything. We hadn't told the family. We were saving it for Nathan's birthday, picturing Meredith's face softening at the sight of the court order, the paper, doing what 3 years of casseroles couldn't. I kept the decree in a manila envelope, flat and official, and brought it to the party folded in my bag. I told myself it was for a joyful announcement. A quieter part of me knew it might become something else entirely. Meredith announced she'd host the party herself, which was new. Usually I cooked and she critiqued. This year, she wanted it in Pine Ridge, her table. Her rules. Nathan's sister Diana, 40 and recently divorced, would handle the details. Diana orbited her mother like a moon that had forgotten its own gravity. She'd moved back to Pine Ridge after the split and appointed herself guardian of the family's small treasures, the photo albums, the holiday china, the question of who sat where. I offered to bring the food and the cake. Diana said, in that bright voice that's really a closed door, we want to keep it family this year. Let family handle the family things. I let it go, but I ordered the cake anyway, because Sophie had asked for the kind with white frosting and strawberries. I wrote out the names for the baker to pipe on top. Nathan, Clara, Sophie, Liam, Ava, Meredith, Frank, Diana. 8 names across the top of that cake. 8, a full number. A family that had grown. On the phone, Diana asked about a kids' table, then answered herself, probably not. The children can sort themselves out. I should have heard the trap then. The chairs were already counted in a house I didn't control. I was bringing a cake with 8 names to a table laid for 7. We drove out on a gray Saturday. The cake box was belted into the middle seat like a third child. Sophie wore a green dress she'd chosen herself and held a rolled-up drawing on her lap, a surprise for Daddy. No peeking. Liam and Ava rode with us, arguing about a video game in the easy way of kids who feel safe. Nathan hummed. I watched the field scroll by and felt, for once, almost hopeful. Today we'd tell them. Today, the paper would speak. Meredith met us at the door with a hug for Nathan, a nod for the older kids, and a distant there she is for Sophie that never reached her eyes. The house smelled of pot roast and lemon polish, a sharp sweetness. The dining room had been set with the good china, cloth napkins, heavy silver that only appeared for what Meredith considered family occasions. I did what I always do in a new room. I counted. 7 chairs, 7 plates, 7 napkins folded into little tents. I counted again because I'm a bookkeeper, and the first count is never the one I trust. 7. Diana came through with a water pitcher and caught me looking. "We're a little tight on space this year," she said, not meeting my eye, and began adjusting a glass by millimeters. The children settled. By my arithmetic, there was exactly enough seating for everyone at that table except Sophie. She stood in the doorway with her rolled-up drawing, doing the same small math and arriving at the same cold answer. She didn't say anything. She just moved a little closer to my side. Before dinner, the neighbors dropped off a birthday card. Meredith lit up. She placed a hand on Liam's shoulder and one on Ava's and presented them like exhibits. "These are the grandchildren. Liam's going to play ball in high school. Can you believe the size of him?" Sophie stood 18 inches away, holding her drawing, smiling up, waiting to be introduced. She wasn't. The neighbors left without learning her name, because in that room, Sophie didn't have one worth saying. Sophie tugged my sleeve and asked the question she'd been circling for a year, finally said aloud, quiet enough that only I could hear, "Mommy, am I a grandkid too?" I knelt right there on Meredith's polished floor. I told her yes. I told her she was somebody's whole world and a lot of people's grandkid, and that the people who couldn't see it were the ones missing out. She nodded the way children do when they want to believe you, and can't quite. Behind me, I heard Meredith and Diana in the kitchen, not bothering to lower their voices much. Diana murmured about the seating, about keeping it simple, and Meredith said the sentence that would become the spine of everything that happened. "This table is for blood relatives." Sophie heard it. I watched it land on her small face, watched her file it next to the bare refrigerator and the recycled drawings and the single small Christmas box. She didn't cry. She got very still, the way I get still. And I understood, for the first time, exactly whose daughter she was. Nathan was out on the porch with Frank, talking gutters and ball games. He didn't hear. If I'd fetched him, there would have been a scene, and Sophie would have learned her belonging was something the adults had to fight over in front of company. I didn't want that for her. So I kept her close, and my bag closer. Inside, flat against the lining, rested the manila envelope, and beside it a folder of 3 years of printed transfers, dated, totaled, sorted by category. Medication, roof, groceries. I'd printed it at midnight while Nathan slept, telling myself it was for my own records. But deep down, I knew. You don't bring your books to a birthday party unless some part of you already knows the party is going to become an audit. I took Sophie to the bathroom down the hall. While she washed her hands, I dug in my bag for a tissue, and the envelope slipped out and landed face up on the tile. Under the bathroom light, the decree stared up at me. In the matter of the adoption of Sophie Hartley, the county seal, the judge's signature in real ink. I smoothed it flat against my thigh and made a quiet promise. Tonight, if Meredith put one hand on my daughter, this paper would land on her table, face up, in front of everyone. Not as a weapon, as a fact. The one thing in that family that didn't care whose nose you had. I slid it back next to the folder of numbers, fact beside fact, and took Sophie's hand and walked her back toward a table that did not want her. I keep books for a living. So let me tell you what I told myself in that bathroom. Write down who shows up for your kids. Save it somewhere quiet. You may go your whole life and never need the list. But the night you finally do, you'll be glad the numbers are on your side. And not just your memory. Dinner was called. Everyone moved, and the choreography Meredith and Diana had rehearsed clicked into motion. Liam and Ava took their assigned chairs. Nathan was waved toward the head of the table near Frank. Diana placed a hand on Sophie's back and began steering her toward the den. "Come on, sweetie, you get the special spot cartoons and a folding tray." I stepped forward. She stays. Diana's smile tightened. She lowered her voice. Mom wants the family photos later. Just the grandchildren. The real grandchildren. She didn't take it back. I understood then. This wasn't improvisation. This was planned. The chair count. The den. The photos. The careful exclusion dressed as practicality. All of it decided before we'd even pulled into the driveway. Meredith appeared in the doorway with the roast, the carving knife in her other hand. She looked at Sophie standing by my side exactly where she belonged, and I watched her decide that wouldn't do. The children who belong at this table will sit at it, she said, pleasant as rain. Sophie can eat in the den. She'll be more comfortable. That word again, comfortable. The kindest sounding cruelty there is. Then she put both hands on Sophie's shoulders and pushed her toward the front door. Sophie stumbled. Her small hand flew out and caught the doorframe. And the drawing, the one Nathan had tucked under his arm and forgotten, slipped loose and dropped face up on the hardwood. All 5 of us holding hands. The yellow sun smiling in the corner. The room went silent. Liam stood up so fast his chair scraped. Ava's eyes brimmed. Frank half rose and sank back, his hand covering his mouth. I crossed the floor, picked Sophie up onto my hip, though she's really too big for that now, and set her down behind me, my hand flat on her back so she'd feel it through her green dress. I straightened and looked at Meredith. I didn't shout. The opposite of shouting. Don't you ever put your hands on my child again. Meredith blinked, unaccustomed to being addressed at her own table in a voice that didn't rise or shake. I'm her grandmother. Then start acting like one. Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway, cake in hand, frosting on his thumb. He saw the drawing on the floor. Sophie's wet face, his mother's arms still half extended. He set the cake down on the counter very, very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have started to shake. What happened? Liam's voice cracked. Grandma pushed her. She pushed Sophie into the door. Nathan's face didn't show rage. It showed something quieter and far more final, a man recalculating every Sunday dinner of the past 3 years. I didn't wait for him to speak. I walked to the empty place where Sophie's chair should have been. You've spent 3 years deciding who counts at this table. I'm done letting you. I laid the manila envelope on the cloth. 6 weeks ago, a judge made Sophie Nathan's legal daughter. Her name is Sophie Hartley. She is his heir, exactly the same as Liam and Ava. That makes her your granddaughter, Meredith, whether you like it or not. I pulled out the decree, the seal catching the light. Frank put on his glasses. Diana craned her neck. Meredith's face lost all color. That's you can't, a judge already did. It's finalized. Signed. Sealed. There's nothing to argue. Liam broke into a grin. So Sophie's really our sister now? For real? She's always been your sister, Nathan said, his voice steady. Eva wordlessly took Sophie's hand. Then I opened the folder. But that's only the first piece of paper. You keep saying this table is for blood relatives. Let's talk about who's been keeping that blood fed. I touched the first line. Frank's heart medication. Every month for 2 years, $500 a month. The roof repair, $6,000. Groceries when the medication ate the grocery money. The water heater. Property taxes. Twice. I turned to the summary page. The total underlined twice. $38,400. Meredith. All paid by me. The outsider whose child you just shoved toward the cold has been quietly underwriting this entire house. The silence gained weight. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. The cake sat on the sideboard. The 8 names still visible, untouched. If you've ever carried a hidden balance like that, hit like right now, you know how heavy it gets. Frank spoke, his voice frayed and ashamed. It's true, Meredith, I knew. I watched her do it and said nothing. I'm sorry. Meredith's hands began to shake. She snatched her napkin off her lap and threw it on the table. How dare you? You think a checkbook makes that child blood? Her voice cracked upward, raw and shrill. I stayed quiet. Colder. I'm not raising my voice. Meredith, I don't need to. The numbers already did. I didn't bring money into this, you did. The day you decided some children eat at the table and some by the door. Nathan stepped up beside me. He picked up Sophie's drawing from the floor, smoothed it carefully, and placed it on the table next to the decree and the ledger. "You pushed my daughter," he said. "Lo, my daughter. I stood in a courtroom 6 weeks ago and swore to be her father for the rest of my life. Tonight, you put your hands on her and called her a stranger. So here's what happens. We are walking out that door together, all 5 of us. And every dollar my wife has been paying stops tonight. If Sophie isn't family, then neither is our money. You cannot have it both ways." Meredith went sheet white. Diana sat down hard in the chair she'd guarded so jealously. The inheritance she'd been policing suddenly revealed as a house kept afloat by the woman she'd excluded. Nathan lifted Sophie into his arms. Liam stood up. "If Sophie can't sit here, I don't want to either." He took her hand. Eva followed without a word. We walked out the front door together, the same door Meredith had tried to push Sophie through an hour earlier. Behind us, nobody spoke. The roast cooled on a table set for 7, the carving knife still next to Meredith's plate. On the drive home down the dark county road, Sophie's small voice came from the back seat. "Did I do something wrong?" Nathan answered before I could, his eyes on the road and his voice rough. "No, sweetheart. You did everything right, just by being you." She fell asleep before the highway, Liam holding her hand on the seat. The next morning, Sophie drew a new picture and signed it Sophie Hartley in the corner. I taped it to the fridge myself, right over the handle. The next week, I closed every recurring transfer. I'm not a cruel person. Frank's heart is still bad, so I set up a direct payment to the pharmacy for his essential medication only, paid straight to them. It comes with a condition in writing, because I write everything down. The day Meredith acknowledges Sophie as her granddaughter and means it, we'll talk about the rest. Until then, the den door stays closed from our side. Frank called once, alone. His voice cracked with an apology that could never fully cover the years. Meredith hasn't called. Diana hasn't either. The hallway in Pine Ridge still has its wall of grandchildren, and Sophie's photo will never hang there. That's their loss to live with now, not my daughter's. Our refrigerator in Oakwood remains covered edge to edge with her drawings. Last week she added a new one, taped right over the handle, 5 figures holding hands in front of a blue house, the sun smiling in the corner. She labeled it the same as always: Mommy, Daddy, me, Liam, Ava, and she signed the corner in careful first-grade letters, Sophie Hartley. Blood may decide whose name goes on a chart, but showing up decides who holds your hand when the door is closing. I still keep very good records of exactly who shows up. If you've ever been the one quietly paying the cost of someone else's belonging, hit like for the keepers of invisible ledgers. Share this with a mother who's had to plant her feet in a doorway. Subscribe to Tranquil Drama Stories for more moments that deserve to be told. We'll keep the door open,